Happy belated Father's Day to those who celebrate. You might have noticed that we're on a fatherhood kick over here. We had Phil Maciak, our first dad guest, talk to us about screens. Garrett Bucks come and unpack the father roles in Mamma Mia. And as you'll learn in today's episode, we really think that boys and men are going to need something more than just whiskey cubes and grill tools to overcome the ways that they too are harmed by a misogynist society. So we've decided to fight the patriarchy one vulnerable man at a time and have put together a Mother of It All summer book club for the best book we've read on the experience of fatherhood, Lucas Mann's new Attachments, Essays on Fatherhood and Other Performances. You are all invited to go over to our Substack at motherofitall.substack.com and get a discount code that makes this book an insane $10, or sign up as a paid subscriber and have the book shipped to you free of charge. Then we'll be convening on the interwebs on August 7th to discuss the book with you all and to interview Lucas about it. We hope you'll join us in what is sure to be a rich, funny, delightful conversation and in supporting more nuanced depictions of fatherhood, which the culture sorely needs. Thank you for listening and supporting us. We think you're really cool. I'm Sarah Wheeler.
And I'm Miranda Rake, and this is the Mother of It All, where we explore motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood.
Good afternoon, Miranda Rake.
Hello, Sarah Wheeler. How are you?
I just took 2 Excedrin, so I think this is going to get a little wild. So I'm great. Headaches out, hyperactivity is in. Let's do this.
I have questions about that because I feel like I know Excedrin from like commercials from when I was growing up, but I don't think of it as like the number one.
Cooler.
Is it an NSAID?
Before MDMA, Excedrin was like, yeah. Is it a what did you say? Is it an enzyme?
NSAID?
NSAID.
Yeah, how do you say that?
I don't know what's in it. I just know it makes me feel good.
Is it like caffeinated ibuprofen or something?
Yeah, it's like Tylenol. Oh my God. I think it's like Tylenol or another one. It's like a pain reliever. Mm-hmm. 2 kinds of pain reliever and caffeine.
Oh,
and then they put a little special something in there that just to kind of, I don't know what it is, a secret ingredient that always like because I have a lot of headaches and it's always a tension between like, do you kind of wait and hold off until it's bad enough that you need meds? Or like the second you feel something begin, do you take the meds because then it'll be more effective? I mean, I think this is a metaphor for like a lot of things around like self-care and martyrdom, right? So I've been experimenting with the latter and just being like, if you feel it, take the drugs.
Yeah.
But the downside to that is that like an Excedrin day for me and my delicate 40-year-old body can sometimes be like pretty wacky. Like I might come to at like 7 p.m., with like my children naked running in the backyard, and like I purchased a lot of like delivery fried chicken or something. And I'll be like, that was wild. So.
Well, I like that. I think it's great to get wild.
Thanks.
And,
I like how that's my version of wild. Is like, I got a little crazy on DoorDash.
That is crazy these days. I feel like it was like 10 p.m. the other night and I was looking for some kind of treat. And I found these 2 tea bags in the back of a drawer that I thought it was a tea that I thought I was out of. And I was like, my husband came into the kitchen and saw me like doing this little like weird dance. And he was like, what's up? And I was like, oh, I forgot. I thought I was out of this tea. And I was like, wow, this is.
Wait, were they hidden in the back of a drawer because they're like contraband?
No, it's like a hibiscus rose tea. And see, it was extra exciting.
Oh, hibiscus rose.
I mean, and it was very exciting because we're kind of having our first like heat. And so what I like to do is I like to brew it strong and then I chill it. And then so I was really actually getting it ready for the next. I didn't even drink it then. I like brewed it strong so that it could cool off so that the next day I would have like really good iced tea all day.
So your vice is tea that like isn't even caffeinated, and then also part of enjoying it like deliciously involves planning.
Yes.
I can't believe we go on this podcast every week and share such titillating details of our personal lives.
I do.
Now we know our moms listen to the podcast.
Oh my
so
God.
we should probably edit that out.
I do like CBD edibles are like a big part of my evening.
Okay,
most
now
days.
we're talking.
So I do have real fun. I mean,
how many of those edibles were you on when you went to look for the tea and did the little dance?
At least a generous half of a gummy.
Yes.
I would say.
Okay, now we're taking it back to the 40 thing. A half. I cut them in half too.
I was talking to a friend about who's originally from the East Coast, and she was mentioning that she noticed living here that over there, calling someone type A is a compliment. And over here on the West Coast, we take it as like a real dig. Like if someone calls you type A, it's like, like it feels like they're telling you need to chill out. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I don't know, of course I like made it about me, and I was like, which one am I these days? And I was thinking about how for my 40th birthday last year, I made a calendar reminder for myself for 3 weeks before my birthday to remind my future self not to overplan my birthday. So I was like, I type A'd myself into not being type
A. Yeah. Like, is that the mark of like an Uber type A? Like a type AA is so type A that they try to out A them. Yeah. Or are you like a West Coast type A? I mean, I have so many East Coast. I grew up in Massachusetts. I have a lot of East Coast, West Coast, diatribes to go on. But I never thought about yes, I think that is true. I get a lot of like I remember when I came out here for college in Southern California, and my mommy was like walking around with me in like move-in day. And she was like, and she's from the East Coast too. And at some point she was like, honey, you have to slow down. Nobody can follow your talking. Like you are talking too fast for these people. So there's even kind of basic things like that. Like sometimes I encounter someone out here and they don't even have an accent, but like just the speed of their speech, I will be like, where are you from? New York, New Jersey, Boston? And people do it to me too. Like I don't have an accent unless I'm with the guys I went to high school with and I've had a few beers. Like I don't have a Boston accent, but all the time people will be like, you're from the East Coast. And I think it's just kind of that Excedrin fueled intensity. Or maybe I don't think I'm type A. People always tell me because I'm a Virgo that I must be like anal. And then I don't know.
I was actually, as we were talking about this, I was like, do I think Sarah is type A?
Oh my God.
Also, I'm curious, like as a psychologist,
educational psychologist.
As an educational psychologist.
Legally, I have to remind you of that.
Is type A real? It's not a real thing, right? It's like a construct, right?
Well, everything's a construct.
Or I guess
Virgo's
it's like
a construct.
Just sort of like, how would we?
ADHD is a construct.
Are you just type A if you think you're type A? Like
yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, it's either used, I think like a lot of identities, it's used for hate or self-understanding, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So, and I guess if you're out on the West Coast, it's the first one. And on the East Coast, it's the other one. Yeah.
That's
yeah. I mean, I go back to Boston and I like cannot believe people are wearing pearls or even jeans. Like the great Nancy Reddy, who was a guest here, lives in New Jersey, and she posted about, she's a professor, that like it was late enough in the semester that she was finally letting herself wear jeans. And I actually didn't understand it for a minute. Like I had to kind of read it over and be like, what is the thing she's saying here? Because I'm a professor and I think all I wear are jeans unless I'm wearing some like booty skirt that's inappropriate. And it's just, I forget that like, it's not just modernity. It's also, like locality.
Yeah.
That in New Jersey, you really like, I guess, cannot wear jeans to work.
I guess Nancy like let us know. Like, I know she listens. Maybe she could weigh in. Maybe she could call in next time with
let's do
some
an East
thoughts
Coast,
about genes.
West Coast call. And I mean, let's shout out to everyone in between. We really smushed them in there, and there's a lot of diversity. There's probably a lot of states where the genes conversation is nuanced. They might have types we've never heard of.
Yeah, I'd like a genes maybe map of the US, and maybe it has like a clock that looks like a time timer, and it shows like the time of day that it's appropriate to wear jeans where you live or something like that, like the number of hours in the day where, like, here I feel like jeans are dressed up. You're like, well, I put on actual pants. Like, this is a hard pant. This is painful for me, so I'm showing you that I care. You know,
but you're saying, like, as the day goes on, your jeans could get like sluttier or looser or dirtier.
Like, I really also only
I love
wear
that
jeans.
You're such a mom that you like visualize a time like your brain works in time timers. If you don't know what a time timer is, Google my name and time timer. I talk about it in basically everything I write.
It's a beautiful thing. Well,
yeah.
Anyway.
I like the idea of like, okay, on the West Coast we don't own slacks, but we do have work jeans and fun jeans is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like after 5 jeans.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Like my jeans where it's like, oh, I like a date night jean, you know, like show my husband that I care. And then I have been known to wear pajamas on date nights, though. I do wear like.
Oh, Miranda.
I know.
That's really bad. Okay. What are you wearing now? I just see this tank top. Do you have pants on?
It's a dress.
Oh my God.
It's so weird.
Wow, it's really cute. I have
Thank you.
I'm wearing my nice jeans for you.
Oh, you look so nice.
But I changed out of a professional shirt because I had meetings earlier into my Freddie Gibbs sweatshirt that I got at the Freddie Gibbs concert.
I want you to be comfortable here.
Thank you. Likewise. Speaking of making people comfortable here, we should stop talking.
Yes.
So that our guest can talk, because she's, I think, a little smarter than we are.
Yeah.
So I would love to introduce her. So for Miranda and I, boys have been very much on the brain lately. I just published a piece in The Cut about my friendship with boys who, are now men. Men are apparently in an epidemic of loneliness. We both have a daughter and a son, and we can really see the kind of differences already that are, encompassing them culturally, and also in the narratives in our heads around our daughters versus our sons. The American Academy of Pediatrics just put out a book last fall called Nurturing Boys to Be Better Men. There's a lot of talk about good men and bad men. We've got everyone on the internet last month saying they'd rather be in the woods with a bear than a man. And when you have a son, you're kind of hearing that and understanding it and going, fuck. So we thought it was time for us to have an episode talking about boys and men, particularly in our unique culture. And luckily we timed the release of it to the release of an absolutely tremendous book on the topic. So we have Ruth Whippman here today. She is the author and cultural critic who has worked for years producing documentaries for the BBC. She also wrote America the Anxious: How Our Pursuit of Happiness is Creating a Nation of Nervous Wrecks. Not me, Ruth. Not me. And the recently released Boymom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity, which has gotten a lot of attention and sparked a lot of interesting conversation since its release. She's originally from London, but she lives in California with her husband and 3 sons. Ruth, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Who's caring for your kids right now, Ruth?
Oh, it's a scramble. So this is the first week of summer break. And so we're doing this. One of my kids has got this thing called Uncamp, which is just like we're sharing each.
It sounds like no camp.
It does sound like that. So it kind of, yeah. So like a bunch of his friends, the families are taking turns to host. And the family that is hosting today has shamed us all up by taking them all to Six Flags. So yeah, our day is going to be like,
rude.
You can be in our backyard and, whatever. But anyway,
did they show you up or take one for the team and now they can just like watch TV for your session?
That's a very, very fair point. Now, I'm extremely grateful. It is very generous and lovely, and the kids are incredibly excited. But my youngest is with me, so my husband and I, who are both working from home, are like switching off, and every hour we switch, and he's definitely the one that needs the most intense parenting. So
yeah, it's one thing to have your oldest hanging around, but
yeah.
Are we going to get a pop on today? Are we going to get a little?
Maybe like BBC
hello?
Dad style. Yeah, it could happen. It could happen, or a tantrum. You could get a live tantrum. So
what's he doing right now? He's with
he's with my husband. Yeah, and I think they're going to go to the dog park.
You just run him like a dog.
Exactly. Boys are like
Because you're a
dogs,
boy
haven't you
mom.
heard? Exactly.
Well,
with the actual dog, to be clear, but
that is a great boys are like dogs is a great segue into the first question that we have for you today, Ruth. That isn't about who's caring for your kids in what, yes, for the Bay Area is the summer. I've been telling other parents, you and me, we live in the Bay Area. It's already the summer here. We're like from the future here to tell parents that this summer is just as kind of shitty as the last one. There's not enough. Everything's expensive. There's not enough care. And there will be one child at home on an iPad about to have a tantrum.
But is the sun, is the sun shining? I mean,
not in the Bay Area.
Oh, it's shining here. It's going to be 90 today.
It's shining here as well.
Feels like summer here.
Yeah,
already.
it's true. We have sun, but I'm always like bracing myself for the July fog where I get seasonal affective disorder.
Oh,
I'm not laughing at you.
It's-
I feel, yeah.
You can laugh. The whole
I
rest
get
of the
it.
year, I feel better than everyone living
You've got
in
more sun.
California.
Yeah.
So I can handle the sadness. I'm just like waking up like sobbing every morning of July.
Oh my God. And then it like goes to August and it's like joy returns, or
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's yeah. And like September and October in the Bay Area get really warm.
it's true.
But then you're also like, when are the fires going to start?
Yeah. We've had
So-
a lot of rain. I'm hoping, I shouldn't even say this out loud, but like I'm hoping for no wildfires. I mean, there will be wildfires.
No, but isn't it the other way around now? That now they say the rain causes them as well,
What?
because it makes the. Oh God, I heard this the other day and I was just so depressed. I was like, oh no,
What?
nothing's good.
That's
Because
the
I
only
heard the thing that it
one.
makes the stuff overgrow, and so there's so much like vegetation that can then dry out and catch
God,
fire.
That makes,
Oh,
that makes
no.
sense. I get
Yeah.
that. I don't
I don't
know.
know. Who knows? I'm not speaking from a position of expertise on that, so don't listen. But I'm speaking from a position of panic. And
Well,
dread.
and you're bringing up, one of life's many kind of paradoxes, and gender, by the way, is also one of them.
It's a
And-
signature Sarah Wheeler transition, and I loved it. A+.
So Ruth, the first thing you take on in your beautiful book is your own skepticism about the experience of having boys being any different than that of having girls or non-binary children, and
Yeah.
your fear of falling into gender essentialism.
Yeah.
Like boys are like dogs, right? So you write about
Yeah.
trying to push back against like even the concept of a boy mom, but then also at the same time you're having this reality of like some of your friends with daughters getting breakfast in bed while your sons are like beating the crap out of each other, out of frame.
Oh my God, yes.
So
or not out of frame, in frame. Very
frame.
much in frame, yeah.
So, and you do like, I think, a really amazing job exploring how it both makes you uncomfortable to even imagine that this might have something to do with gender, but that it's also pretty hard to ignore. So,
Yeah.
so my question for you is that after writing a book like this, do you still feel ambivalent about gender differences? How do you wrap your head around them now?
Yeah, so there's so much sort of packed into that. Yeah, because I always had this view, and I think I was raised with this view of feminism, which was like, gender is all socialized, and like the reason why boys behave badly is because we kind of enable that and we let them get away with it. So it's a kind of version of that boys will be boys story. So it's like, oh, boys, while they kind of hit each other or like, assault someone on campus, or, all these sort of male tropes of bad behavior. the idea was kind of like, well, that happens because we socialize them. We don't hold them to as high a standard as we hold girls. And then, and so when the whole kind of conversation about toxic masculinity kicked off, I was so adamant that I was going to do better and I was going to do differently. And I was going to hold my boys accountable and give them the same standards of behavior as I would have given to a girl. But then they just were completely wild. I was blindsided by the kind of level of like physical, the wrestling, the fighting, some of it was play fighting, but it would quite easily slip into like basically like a kind of a bar fight type vibe with the two of them. And so it was really tricky because of that framing, I sort of felt like I'd walked into my own ideological trap in a way. It was like, if they behave badly, if boys behave badly, it's because we socialize them like that. So it must be my fault that my boys are behaving so badly. And I would
and the only way I'll get out of this trap is to write a book about it.
Exactly. That's the easy way out. Yeah. And I would see like friends' girls, and it would be, we had, at one point we were living upstairs in an apartment, and our downstairs neighbors had girls of the same age, and they would they would get up early to make French toast casserole for their parents for breakfast, at young ages. And my boys would be like pummeling each other on the rug. And it was stressful. And I internalized so much guilt about it. And then I did end up looking at the research, and there is a fair amount of research on sex differences. And there is some evidence to show that boys are, as a group, more rough and tumble than girls are, and it has to do with fetal testosterone. But the other part of it, that there was the thing that really stood out when I was looking at the research into gender differences is not so much that boys are like naughtier or more aggressive or anything like that. It's actually that they're kind of more sensitive and emotionally vulnerable than girls are. A baby boy, I was really surprised to find that when a baby boy is born, his brain is about a month to 6 weeks behind a girl's brain in the right brain, which is the part that deals with emotions, emotional self-regulation, attachment, relationships, all that, emotion-based stuff. And I think that what happens is that because of that immaturity in the brain, the boy's brain is more vulnerable to disruption. And so they kind of need a lot more support and care from their caregivers. But because we kind of masculinize them and disengage from them a bit emotionally, it can lead them to have a harder time down the line with things like emotional self-regulation. And that can look like bad behavior.
But I wanted to ask you about that,
Sure.
the research that you present in the book about these differences and about the fact, I loved your framing that, as opposed to needing less from us and sort of just, I feel like there's this trope about, all you have to do with boys is keep them alive, these wild guys. And dogs, girls require so much more, they're so complex. And actually you're really saying, well, no, the research actually says that boys need just as much or possibly more like attentiveness and nurturing and awareness of sensitivity. So I'm curious, as a parent of boys yourself, and now who's spent so much time in this research, like what is the utility in knowing this? What does it mean kind of in terms of action as a parent?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, there is this trope. I keep hearing, the boys are like dogs is a phrase that I used to hear all the time, or I still hear all the time about parenting boys. It's just like food, exercise, just try and wear them out, and that's all they need. They're these simple creatures. And also we tend to kind of project all these masculine qualities onto like even the youngest baby boys. So we see them as like angry when they cry instead of sad, or we see them as tough and sturdy, and that we just want to roughhouse with them and wrestle with them, but not really give them that real like emotional engagement. And I think that absolutely, as you say, the research really sort of presents quite a clear picture that they absolutely do need every bit as much nurture as girls, and possibly more, because their brains are more immature. They really need more help with this kind of stuff. They need more help with, emotional regulation. They need more help with being comforted. They need more help with engaging with emotions and that kind of thing. And they get significantly less. parents engage with them in quite different ways. And I think the prescription for that is it's really just a sort of orientation of mind. I don't think it's like 5 simple tips and tricks to, you know, to emotionally engage with your boy. It's more about just a fundamental rethinking of what a boy is and what a boy needs and what they need from us, and to see them as absolutely equally complex as girls, equally emotionally having as much emotional potential as girls, and to and really nurturing that. And so, you know, giving them, you know, we learn to care for others by being cared for ourselves. You know, we don't learn to care for others by being punished for being bad, you know. And so it's about emotion, you know, empathizing with boys, naming emotions, talking about emotions, listening to their feelings, trying to recognize when what looks like sort of behavioral problems and dysregulation is actually driven by emotions, and trying to sort of engage on that level. And just presenting them with stories about relationships, role models for good relationships, and all of those kinds of things, which I think we very naturally give to girls, and we kind of don't when it comes to boys.
Well, what you're saying is interesting. You know, it's what I'm hearing is, in order to socialize our boys in a different way than, you know, than we have previously maybe seen, we have to examine the ways in which we have been socialized as a right. And so it always seems to come back to that. Like, we have to interrupt our own patterns. And
it's so true.
That's really tough. And your book, I think, that's the utility of your book, because even just reading it did make me get curious about what maybe I was doing without realizing it.
Yeah, you have this anecdote in the book where your husband is kind of like coaching your son to ask his friend who's like going through a hard time. I think his friend's grandmother died, to like ask him about it on his next play date. And I just like, I mean, I like super circled that. And I was just thinking about it with my son, because, you know, Miranda and I both have a son and a daughter. And I think we agree that there's just a wide range of individual differences. And also that like this generation's increased awareness of gender construction is notable. And that even in like the most progressive place, where like 1/3 of the kids in 2nd grade are referring to themselves as, you know, with they, them pronouns, these differences like do exist. And in some ways I'm like, it's not that I don't care whether they're nature or nurture. Obviously I do. And the way that your book pulls those things out, or like attempts to, even though you admit like we'll never fully know, is really helpful. But wherever it comes from, it is a fact that boys at a population level are kind of getting spit out of childhood and adolescence with a very different set of skills and orientation to the world. So like I have what I would describe as a sensitive boy, but he absolutely is not coming back from a play date and telling me, you know, Marcus's grandma died and he feels really sad. And my daughter is 100% doing that. And so it's really hard for me, to your point, Miranda, like about disrupting our own things, to kind of be persistent with that. And not just either like kind of be like dismiss his inability to do that as like inherent and unchangeable, or kind of be like, well, you suck. You don't care about people's feelings. You're a symbol of the patriarchy. And like, you know, this kid's in my house and I love him. So it's a long way of saying, you know, you inspired me to just kind of like push a little further and be a little more persistent around kind of just those moments of like pointing out and explicitly teaching care and emotional vulnerability to my kid.
Yeah. I mean, I think the nature-nurture thing, I think we do get really hung up on that. You know, is it nature? Is it nurture?
Why would it be one and not the other? Like, we know that our society, we're complex, you know?
Right. And I think most people would agree that it is a bit of both. And we will probably never know like how much is each. But the point is that the socialization piece is the part that we have some agency over. Right. And that is the part that we can control. And socialization isn't just one thing. I mean, it's like, it's not just what we do in the home. It's everything that they get from the world, from art, from other people they see, from other boys, from, you know, whatever's happening in the homes of every other boy they know is impacting on them as well. So every boy is being socialized, and we all have these blind spots. And so I think, yeah, as Miranda was saying before, it is just this case of sort of looking inside ourselves. And I mean, I think when I've been doing a lot of interviews recently, and people are always like, what are your 5 tips for engaging your boys? And I'm like, you know, I don't really have those, because each boy is different and will respond to different things. And I think sometimes you come with some script, you know, you're like, hello, would you like to talk about your emotions? And it feels unnatural, because you've got to do it as you know, you've got to do it as the person that you are and the person that your kid is, and that whatever makes sense in that relationship. But I think it's just that sometimes we don't even think to engage our boys like that, because we just assume that's what they're like. And because girls naturally seem to be more interested in it or better at it, then it's almost like, I think the Boys Will Be Boys story has sort of encouraged us to do less for boys, but actually it should be encouraging us to do more.
Or do something different, right? You have this line that I heard you say in another interview that I scribbled down, which was that we spend too much time listening to boys and men's opinions and not enough time listening to their feelings.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think down the line, what you see happening later, I mean, this isn't so, but maybe also for younger kids, but like teenagers on, you know, if we listen to boys' opinions and not their feelings, then they tend to like recast those feelings into these really toxic opinions at the worst. You know, so when I spent time, you know, researching the manosphere and incels and those kinds of people, often what you see is what essentially are really hurt and painful feelings of being unheard and unseen. And they kind of twist them into these opinions because they think that they're more likely to be valued for their opinions.
Oh, that's so
than
interesting.
Their feelings. So it's kind of like misogyny and hatred and, you know, racism and those kind of horrible kind of manosphere opinions. Often when you look at them, just sort of a millimeter below is some really, really, really hurt feelings.
That's such an interesting manifestation of that. Yeah, I mean, some of the most intriguing parts of your book were, you know, your conversations with incels. You also talked to boys who were like undergoing like positive masculinity training. We'd love to know how, like, you know, what you learned when you did actually talk to them about feelings. What was the kind of the most striking thing that stood out for you about what boys kind of need from caregivers?
Yeah, well, what was really interesting, so I interviewed all kinds of different boys, you know, different economic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, and different kind of political views, including, yes, members of the incel movement and some just kind of regular boys that, you know, from all over the country. And one thing, so a couple of things. One was that I had expected them to be these kind of monosyllabic, like I expected it to be really hard work interviewing them, and I would have to like really draw them out. And actually it was the total opposite. They just wanted to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And they had so many feelings. And it was as if nobody was listening to them. They were these like tightly coiled springs that you're just like, let them go. And they just, you know, they just go and go and go. And I think they felt so unheard. They were just really happy that somebody was listening. And when it came to things like connection and, you know, loneliness, those were themes that came up a lot. And especially when it came to friendship, they actually really wanted, and many boys said this to me, that they actually really wanted these deeper, more emotional, more involved connections with their friends, with their parents, with everybody. But they just felt they couldn't do it, especially with peers. Partly they didn't know how to do it, and partly they felt just like masculinity norms meant that they felt embarrassed going to their friends and being like, oh, you know, tell me about your grandma dying, or I want to tell you about my grandma dying, or whatever it was. They just felt that this image of masculinity that they felt that they had to uphold just precluded that.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't accessible to them.
Yeah, I loved you had this like boy support group, teen boy support group that you spend some time in. And you have them kind of like basically insulting each other for an hour. And then in like right at the end of the group, like giving this like amazing therapeutic coaching session to one of the boys about like how to talk to his mom about her alcohol use. Like, and it was like, oh, it's in there. It's in there. It's in there.
But it was so beautiful to watch. I was with them. It was like a 2-hour session. It's called Guys Group. It's in the Teen Therapy Center in LA. And the guy running it, Kent Toussaint, is really great at handling them. But yeah, it really was. It was like a good hour of them just being like, you're a pussy, you're a faggot, you know, you know, calm, just like insult after insult, trash talking. I mean, it was like banter in the sense it was like jokey, but it was like aggressive and it was impossible for them to get through. And it just went on and on and on and on. And I was like, oh God, you know, how are we going to get to anything more? And then eventually they did break through. So I think it's often about patience. You know, it's just like this, they're up against so much in terms of how they feel. They have to perform masculinity. They have to behave around other guys. They have to behave in public. And so it's just like this patient, like the leader was just so patient and persisting and keeping on trying and trying different ways and different avenues. And then once they got going, they were so emotionally literate and able to do it. It's not that they can't, it's just that they feel like it's not masculine to do it and that they will be judged and policed and whatever it is, you know, they feel embarrassed to do it. Whereas girls have utter social permission to be fully emotional, relational creatures.
Thinking about what you were, you know, you've said a few times, this idea of the stories that we tell. And after reading your book, I started thinking about the stories that Griffin absorbs and just kind of evaluating them in my mind, my son Griffin. And I think, you know, my husband is like a movie guy and I like movies too. And I was just thinking about how much of the stories that are kind of ubiquitous in our culture tend to be like, you know, violent, good versus evil, like these kinds of very simplistic, somewhat inherently like aggressive stories. And both of my kids love this like Spidey show that's on Disney Plus. It's like baby Spider-Man. You know, it's fine. And the bad guys aren't that bad and blah, blah, blah. But it's still like a pretty simplistic story. And these superhero stories are so ubiquitous that you feel like kind of this like wet blanket if you're kind of like, well, you know, I'm gonna like say no more of this.
I hid these old Superman books like at the, you know, I was just like, it's enough, okay? Like you can do, you can read like whatever, like Spider-Man comics, but these are like colonialists, like Superman going to other planets and like the people are stupid there or the creatures there, and I like hid them. And I just was like, what am I doing? Oh, this is so confusing.
When I was a little girl, there was a family joke about my mom and I loved to play games and I really loved Monopoly and my mom hated Monopoly. And I have a memory of having
it's boring.
Yeah, well,
objectively.
So I had
we used to call it monotony when I was a kid.
Oh, that's good.
I loved it. But my mom was like playing it with me begrudgingly because I had the flu, and I remember I was winning, and I was probably being like an asshole about winning. You know, I was like, "Oh, these are my hotels, and you owe me this," and my mom like stopped the game and was like, "This is a stupid capitalist game, and I'm not playing it anymore." And I was like a little girl, and I was like, "Oh my God, what?" But you know, now I look back and I'm like, well, you know, that's a valid critique. Like this is really messed up, and
right.
So I'm hoping I'm comforting myself because I have recently, since reading your book, we have cleaned up our act with like content, and I have we're not watching like fighting movies. That's what I just call them, and that includes like half of what has been on the watch list.
Yeah, what do you have left to watch? Like,
so I have to think also, a little harder, right? So
well,
like,
and also there's this tension though between like, I mean, Ruth has talked in the book about being raised by a feminist mom who like didn't let you wear pink, right, Ruth?
Right,
and and I have another friend like that too, where like it was like no Barbies, and you know, those I think there's some interesting things came of that, but that didn't keep you from sexism, right? It didn't keep you from the harms of being a woman raised in the patriarchy. And like, you know, it turns out wearing pink is not the same as like internalizing horrible messages from the culture about what it is to be a woman, right? And so like it for me as a parent, I'm just like, it both is the Spidey show and it isn't, you know, it's, and so it becomes so hard to know what your individual choices should be. Or if like you just do things because that's your value and you don't like, you're not tying it to some major, you know, fantasy outcome.
I mean, I think with our kids, what I've sort of uneasily landed on, and I have all the same dilemmas and questions, and like how much I think because I grew up, yes, absolutely, with a feminist mom, and it was more about no than yes. So it was like no Barbies, no pink, and there was like this toy that I desperately wanted called a Girl's World. It was this British toy, which was like this disembodied head with hair that you could use to like do makeup
Oh,
and like
we have
hairspray.
those too in
Oh, you
America.
had those
Yeah.
too? It was really
It's
like I had this like
cut off
1,000
from the
yards
boobs up,
yeah, it
right?
looks
It's like
kind of
shoulders and yeah.
and it's got a really like sex doll vibe to it.
Yes.
But I was not allowed one of those, and I desperately wanted one. And also the title of it, looking back, like Girl's World, really?
Actually,
But
Ruth, the rest of the body is the sex doll. You got the kids
yeah,
get the
in
head.
They're like, what do we
the
do with
kids-
all these heads?
Yeah. Oh my
Wait
God.
a minute.
I'd watch that expose. Yeah, that sounds amazing. But yeah, so anyway, but my mom was more about like keeping me from things, and I think probably because of that, I've tended to take a more like, I'm not forbidding anything, I'm just like trying to add stuff in. But the problem is that like, whenever I go to like a friend's house who has girls, and you look on their like Netflix thing, on their homepage, everything is like a story about friendship or relationships.
Yeah.
The
We're doing the
algorithm
Babysitters
keeps-
Club right now with my daughter. But
Yeah.
my son did watch it with us last night.
Oh,
And like,
yeah.
it wasn't his choice, but he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll watch it with you guys. And then
Yeah.
he was like into it. And it was the 2-parter about summer camp with a cliffhanger. And he was like, please, can we watch the next one?
Oh yeah, you see, that was,
I don't know what it'll do, but
I feel like adding those things in. But the problem with the Babysitters Club is that, there's no boys in it. And so
Yeah.
obviously it's great for them to watch things about girls, and we want them to think that girls are people, and that have their own interiority and all of that. But if they constantly watch shows which are about friendships and relationships, but the only characters in them are girls, then
right, it
that's
becomes
the
a girl
problem.
thing.
And
Yeah.
you know about the Babysitters Club, that's like a book from the 80s or whatever. And you can know that if it had been a book from the 80s called like Science Club, and it had been about 4 boys, that when Netflix remade it, they would have put 2 girls in there
Yeah.
as scientists or whatever they were. But it's kind of a blind spot that, that we don't see. We feel as though we need representation of boys in those like relational roles. And so they don't put a boy babysitter in. And actually, I've seen a lot of, even in the Babysitters Club, I tried watching that with my son. And like in one episode, there were 3 really negative comments about boys. The girls would just say these throwaway comments about how boys suck and, whatever. And you can see why. And it's like a trope of girlhood or whatever. But actually, my boy's watching it. Like, well, why is that okay? Why is it okay to say that?
Well, what do you think that is, Ruth? Like, why do you think we're afraid of kind of cultivating positive images of boyhood? And
yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. Partly, I think it's just a kind of blind spot because we value like masculine associated qualities. We see those as the ones that, we need to give girls access to those sort of masculine things. So we see a lot of shows and things about girls being like scientists and Supreme Court justices and rebel girls and like superhero girls, because we see those are the things we value as important. But because we kind of trivialize and undervalue anything that's associated with femininity or girls or women, we don't see it as a loss to boys. So like anything to do with relationships or friendships, we sort of trivialize those. And so it kind of becomes a self-reinforcing pattern. And we don't see it as a loss to boys that they don't get that stuff. So partly I think it's a blind spot. Also, I think partly it's just a kind of squeamishness, because the cost to boys of being like a girl is so much higher than the cost to girls of being like a boy. So it's like when girls are like boys, it's basically a promotion. And when boys are like girls, it's like an emasculating, humiliating demotion.
Right, right. Even like tomboy, which I know we're like not trying to say anymore, isn't full derogatory. Whereas like, pussy is, I guess, like is the flip of that, or sissy or sissy, something.
Yeah. Right, because tomboy was always like someone to be admired. I don't know if you guys read the Enid Blyton books when you were kids. It was like this really like very, very popular British author. And there was a girl, they had the famous 5 and the secret 7. They were like little kids who would go off and solve mysteries and stuff. And there was a girl in there who was a tomboy, and she dressed like a boy and she had short hair and all of this. But it was definitely in the tone of like admiring, like, oh, what a brave girl, not, whereas when a boy was acting like a girl, it was always derogatory.
What I would say is like we haven't drawn, hard lines around like what he consumes. Like, I just talked to my husband about it. I didn't actually talk to Griffin about it because I figured if I said like we're drawing this, no fighting, I didn't want to make it a thing. But I was like,
you're going back to the like more no's than yeses kind of thing.
And I was like, for David, my husband and I said, we're going to take a break from fighting movies because we Griffin is young enough. We still really control what he consumes. And so I said, usually when we do movie nights, we do trailers and then we let him choose from the trailers. So like,
we do that too.
And so I just said, let's like knock the Avengers out of the trailer mix, and let's not push him in this direction. Let's lean this way. And what I have found is probably the stories that we're leaning towards tend to be sports movies more, because that seems to be a lot of what the boy kind of content is, but it's pretty decently emotional. There's usually a feelings element, and there's also kind of like a coming togetherness.
Are you talking about Cool Runnings?
I'm talking about Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings
I'm always talking
is
about
definitely
Cool Runnings.
positive masculinity.
He loves that movie, and it is totally like
they don't win.
Right.
They don't win. That's the best part.
It's all
in the
about,
end, they don't win. They
it's
just
beautiful.
Like love each other and are proud of who they are.
I just can't recommend that movie enough. It's like he loves it. And then like we did Mighty Ducks and he loves The Sandlot and all of these kinds of movies about boy friendships. And they tend to be about like feelings. Like in Sandlot, the kid has like all these feelings about his stepdad and he's like feels like he's bad at this thing and he gets basically mentored by this other kind of older boy who takes him under his wing. And like, I think it's really, I don't want to paint like this perfect picture, but there are stories if you look for them. And all I had to do was like think a little bit harder.
You do have to.
And I had to also then consciously avoid, right? Like consciously, and it's not a hard no. Like if Griffin wants to, I don't want to make it like super alluring by making it a hard no, but when we get to decide what he consumes, we are like pointing in a
but that's not going to last much longer, and I think
don't tell me that.
Is that I heard about a woman who paid her teenage sons to watch the show Sex Education.
Oh God, I love that show. It's so good.
What did you think of it?
I support that.
I don't know. I mean, I'll follow. I mean, I just think that's kind of like a brilliant older kid solution.
Genius. I love
just to be like, you need this content.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my older son and I, Sully, have been watching Wednesday. And I think it sort of satisfies us both because it's got the kind of like, gothic sort of vibe that he likes, but it also has a lot of relationships stuff in there as well. It's basically kind of a high school drama, which speaks to me. But I think it's just, I feel like it takes work and parenting's exhausting. And so I'd like this stuff to be more kind of obvious, because I think if you just kind of let go and just let whatever's going to happen naturally happen, then they could easily, every single show that they ever watch for the rest of their life could be between, heroes and villains, someone fighting, everyone fighting, someone's a hero, someone gets killed, and that's it,
Big
that's
guns.
the default,
Yeah.
And I think, parents who have children of color talk about this too, where like, I just want to see my kids represented in books, but like also I don't want everything to be about how they're like combating who they are, it's like there are some stories that are about boys like being different and then they, and then like they get to like, they're allowed to be a sissy basically. And they have to like overcome it. But like really what we want to see is just different like day-to-day representations of maleness. And I have to put a plug in for the most revolutionary book, like move over, people's history of the United States that I ever seen in my life, which is called Clive and His Bags. It is a board book by Jessica Spaniel, who has this series called about Clive and Rosa. And it's just a board book about a boy who loves bags. And there's no narrative about how that's bad or good. It's just literally like Clive takes his backpack to the park, Clive likes a grocery bag when he helps his parents do grocerying, you know, whatever you call it. And there's Clive and his hats. Clive is a teacher, I think is one of them. It's like, it's just showing like, and
Boys
to me,
just doing stuff.
right.
Yeah,
And it also makes you realize you're like, oh my God, liking bags is a gendered characteristic. Like that's how bad things have gotten. But it is kind of where you need to start, right?
Yeah. And it's great that it's a board book because you've got it like, you get them in at an early age. Because I feel like there's this sort of trend, like, you know, when our kids were really little and we did the board book thing, like it's the vehicles, like human dilemmas can only be explored through the sort of emotional lives of diggers. And it's like
Skeet Scooter, whatever.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, you just see it all the time. Like they sort of funnel the emotional stuff in, you know, by the back door. Sorry, mixing metaphors here. But it's like, you know, it's acceptable to talk about feelings so long as it's coming out of a bulldozer's mouth and not a human. But I'd like to see some actual boy, you know, with real boys.
Well, and I think your book
You know,
and your research is showing us that boys can talk about their feelings without diggers, you know, and like we have to,
right? And they want to, right? And that was the thing. I think that all the boys I spoke to really wanted to talk that way. It wasn't, you know, you hear all this like boys aren't like that. They don't want that stuff. They're just different. You know, don't try and push on them things that they don't want. But actually, what was so striking was that they really did want it, and they really did want it from other boys. And they felt that they could talk to their parents that way often. They could be quite open with their parents or with women, like with girlfriends or female friends. They just couldn't do it with other boys.
Yeah, it makes me think about, like, I'm just thinking about my son's very sweet and tender and also very, you know, physically active, wrestly, World War II playing group of boyfriends. And like, you know, I'm almost like, Ruth, you're kind of inspiring me to like I kind of want to talk to all those parents and just be like, what's kind of our collective goal for these guys? And like, they're 8 now and they still like hold hands. And like, how do we help them? Because your research also, you know, you cite research that shows that kind of like social emotional gap in skills widens between boys and girls as they get older. Like what can we do in little ways to at least try to kind of close that gap for them and keep this ability, you know, to kind of, you know, be vulnerable with each other alive.
So I think it's like a lot of different things, isn't it? Because it's like things that we can do, little things that we can do and expose them to more things and talk about those things with boys and normalize like boys talking to each other like that. But it is also like wider cultural change, which moves more slowly. But I think, you know, I'm hopeful because I think culture change has really happened with girls. I think like when I look back to when I was a kid and the kind of like sexist bullshit, sorry, am I allowed to say that? But like the
you can say sexist here.
Okay, I can say sexist. Amazing, dirty word, but yeah, the things that we just used to take as completely normal when I was a kid that was so sexist, and you look back now and you're like, whoa, how did we get away with that? And like culture has shifted, and even in the last 5 years since like Me Too, what we used to take as completely normal and acceptable is now totally unacceptable. So I believe that the culture can change with boys, and I think, you know, having these kinds of conversations is important because it's about a sort of mindset shift. So, and it's not, I mean, it is on parents in a way, but it's not all on parents. It's on all of us to sort of collectively change the stories about who boys are, what they need, what, you know,
well,
and
I think
how
that
we
can
engage
feel
with them.
Like really overwhelming. And, you know, that, and I was thinking about your book, which I love. And then also I had this sense of like, wait, is toxic masculinity like for moms to fix now? Like,
right.
I can't,
another
like,
thing.
and you're like, no. And so I think, but then I started thinking about really how almost comforted I could be or how simple it could be. Like fostering, I think I've mentioned this before, like my son's relationship with his guitar teacher who, and sort of basically delegating, right? Like who these, I can't model for my son healthy masculinity.
Yeah.
So I can't.
Nick,
so I can
or
let
just
other
like
people
teddy
do that.
bear of a male babysitter. you know,
Yeah.
who, by the way, like when he first came over, didn't know that like you have to clean up a little after the kids go to bed. But then like actually after talking to Ruth about male babysitters, I felt like, you know, kind of like I wanted to put in the extra effort to be like, hey, Nick, like, will you do that? You know, that's kind of a part of babysitting. And then he got it and now he does it. And my son also kind of like saw that like story of growth.
Yeah. So like little tiny things, right? Like I think that the idea of like, we don't have to solve it all. Maybe all we have to do is think about it a little bit, which we are already doing.
Yeah.
And then your book allows those, I think, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode, that a lot of us don't even feel comfortable talking about gender in this way. And so to even allow ourselves to say, like, maybe our boys need something that is a little different, and what might that be?
That's not, and just admitting that is not like letting the patriarchy win, you know. This is all of this is good for, you know, women,
right? And patriarchy,
sure.
I mean, this is the thing, like that framing, it's like, I think I started off being like, oh, you know, helping boys is somehow like letting girls down, but it's just like we're all trapped in the same system. Patriarchy harms boys and it harms girls and it harms men and women. It harms all of us. And so we're all trapped in this system together. And, you know, we need to fight it for all our sakes. You know, we're on the same side here.
You have this beautiful line in the book I'll butcher that's like, you know, I wanted to fight the patriarchy and I also wanted to like wrap it up in its blankie and give it a nap, you know? So I think, you know, I appreciate you naming that tension and exploring it so well. Well, we already did media recommendations, but before we let you go, Ruth, I made a promise to myself that I wanted to ask you a question on this podcast that you had not been asked by any of your other interviewers on your, you know, elaborate press tour. And you talk a lot in the book about Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the series by Jeff Kinney, how disappointed you are by kind of the ways that male friendship are talked about there, and kind of like, you know, how it's not your favorite model. So I wanted to know, and I know we have ambivalence about even the like hashtag Boymom, but so I will say, we're all mothers of boys here. Marry, fuck, kill Jeff Kinney, the Diary of a Wimpy Kid creator, Dave Pilkey, the Captain Underpants and Dogman creator, or Satoshi Tajiri, the Pokemon creator.
Oh God. Okay. I feel like, well, God, this is a hard one. I think I'm gonna marry the Pokemon guy.
Okay.
Because I feel like I really don't want to be married to either Captain Underpants or Wimpy Kid guy.
Well,
I feel like
they're not, you know.
I feel like, yeah, but that's a long-term relationship, and I think that Pokemon's got something kind of sweet in it. Whereas, like, Dav Pilkey's underpants on my bedroom floor. No, thank you.
You're equating him. You're saying he is Captain Underpants.
I mean, Captain Underpants is inside him. I mean, surely.
That's true.
You know, that came out of that brain, and so I think, So I'll go for, I guess, but then I feel like Wimpy Kid guy is mean. I think Captain Underpants is like kind of good natured, and I feel like Wimpy Kid has some mean. So I'm gonna kill. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah,
sorry,
maybe
Jeff.
We won't kill. Maybe we'll rehabilitate.
Rehabilitate. Yeah, a program off in a remote island in the bay. Good treatment, but lots of rehabilitative thinking, and that leaves me with fucking Dave Pilkey. Oh dear.
Yeah, I think he's a fun guy. So
I've never seen a picture of him. So
he
might be fun. His stuff is funny. I mean, there's lots of.
He's like he's like a self-disclosed neurodivergent person. I think he's dyslexic and ADHD, and he talks about how hard school was for him and like how he wants kids to just like love reading.
That's true. And no, you know what? I've got to say, I've got to give him some love. He's
supposedly very nice.
Yeah, I've got to give him some love, actually. I don't want to really shit on his work because my kids have really loved his books and they are very funny. Like there are moments and they just kind of escalate and become more and more absurd. And I do appreciate that. So yeah, I think
I'd marry him. And I'd fuck the Pokemon guy because, like, I don't know if, like, is he going to evolve? Maybe, like, I bet he can. I bet he can have multiple orgasms. Yeah. He's obviously someone who thinks about like powering up and kind of, he's and having all sorts of cool tips and tricks. I just feel like it might be like an 8-hour bang session.
An 8-hour sex session. I don't know if I want an 8-hour bang. I feel like I want it over quickly. But then
you want the ADHD guy.
Is he that? Yeah, ADHD guy will be over quickly.
Well, thank you for humoring me, Ruth. And thank you for being here. Boymom is out in the UK. Order the book, review it and rate it. That really matters for authors. And you can also follow Ruth on Substack. She has a lovely newsletter, I Blame Society, where you can hear her continued musings about this complex world.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking with you.
Thanks for listening.
And like my mom always said, boys are people too.
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Nox Media with music from It's Electric. You can follow us on Substack at motherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox, chat and comment features, episode transcripts, and more. And on Instagram at The Mother of It All. We know you are profoundly busy, but if you like listening and can manage to follow, rate, or review us in a small moment between leaning in and having it all, it will help us reach a wider audience and meet our stretch goal of getting Michelle Obama on the pod. Thanks for your support. Now get out there and have a totally passable day.